You're listening to
Bush Radio. Bush Radio.
Your real talk radio.
Reading is feeding the mind. When he feeds his mind, his body is happy and he is rich. Feed the mind. Go to www.udarabooks.com. Udara Books, feeding the mind.
State Affairs with Edmund Obilo is live. Stay tuned.
Concerning the Infectious Disease Control Bill 2020, you released a statement, and in your statement, you welcomed the idea of having a legislation to guide the control of infectious diseases. However, you said that the bill is ill-timed. Can you break this down?
We are struggling to contain a pandemic, a highly infectious disease at the moment. And we do not even have sufficient resources to handle this. So there's a lot of pressure on the Nigeria Center for Disease Control, on the Federal Ministry of Health, on health workers across the country, and even affecting the health system as we speak. So the Infectious Disease Control Bill is an important bill, which I support the principles and the spirit behind enacting a legislative framework for infectious disease in Nigeria. However, we do not bring such bill at the moment because we are going to have a lot of emotional responses, as we are already getting a lot of Nigerians are reacting emotionally towards some of the content, based on some theories going around the place in the middle of this pandemic. Also, the professionals, the health workers are too busy at this time to even make meaningful contribution to this bill. So I feel it's better that we continue with the use of guidelines and executive orders that Mr. President, of course, the Quarantine Act, as obsolete as it is, supported with the guidelines being provided by the Presidential Task Force. We make do with that at the moment until after the control of the COVID-19 pandemic. Then with the lessons we've learned from COVID-19 control, as well as lessons learned from the Ebola control in 2014, and the Lassa Fever, we had the largest outbreak of Lassa Fever, of recent, that we are just, being able to control at the moment. So we put all these things together, we'll be in the best frame of mind, to look at everything holistically, because infectious diseases is not just COVID-19 or Ebola or Lassa Fever. It includes common cold, typhoid fever, cholera, hepatitis B, and so many of them. So what is applicable to COVID-19 is not applicable to common cold. So we need to bring all these contexts into consideration.
Now let's look at what the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, said during Tuesday's plenary. He says our current framework for the prevention and management of infectious diseases is obsolete and no longer fit for purpose. The current law severely constrains the ability of the federal government of Nigeria and the Nigeria Center for Disease Control to take proactive action to prevent the entry into Nigeria of infectious diseases and the management of public emergencies when they occur. He goes to state, I disagree wholeheartedly with the suggestion that this is not the ideal time to seek reforms of the Infectious Diseases and public health emergency framework in the country.
Well, I respect Mr. Speaker's opinion. He's a lawmaker. Their job is to make laws. So I quite understand there's, as far as legislators are concerned, any law can be made at any time. So I quite understand Mr. Speaker's perspective, and I respect that. But I still feel that the business of lawmaking involves the people. The legislators represent the people, and even though they've called for public hearing, the participation at that public hearing, I don't know when it's going to hold, but if he holds at this time and is at a period, perhaps if, for instance, today they say the public hearing will be in 4 days' time, and people are preparing for the public hearing, and we have more records of COVID-19 that requires more stringent and more urgent response. Even people who plan to participate in that will not be able to participate. Even if they send they plan to send memos, they might be too busy to even prepare those memos to send to National Assembly. Even Nigeria Center for Disease Control, that is the main organization that should lead the implementation of this bill, the Director General had said that he would prefer this bill to come after the control of COVID-19 pandemic is over. And I think such should be respected as well, because it can make laws that are not implementable.
You have complained that the bill has many provisions that violates personal privacy and confidentiality of patients. Tell me more.
Yes, it has such provisions because part of the bill asks that as a health worker, as a doctor, the NCDC would require you to provide any information about your patient. Using the language "any" is far-reaching, because every doctor swore an oath of confidentiality on his or her patient, and that confidentiality holds even after the death of the patient, that you hold those information confidential. But of course, there is a caveat to it, that you could share that information with others who are involved in the management of the patient, or anybody who will use that information for the benefit of the patient. Also, in a period of public health crisis, the health information can also be used to protect the overall population. So, to give powers to an individual to say that the health worker should provide any information, it gives room for, even if that information will not be relevant, for the management of the pandemic, if we have infectious disease pandemic, or even for the management of the patient per se, it could be requested. So it's subject to abuse when you say any information about a patient, and the health worker, if he doesn't provide it, is liable to fine or go into jail. So that could be used by the state for other reasons other than the intention for which is being made. And it says, irrespective of rule of law, irrespective of what any other law or regulation has provided. So I think it's such a dangerous thing that people who have things against some other personalities could just use that provision to invade their privacy and possibly cause harm.
There's also the complaint that the bill criminalizes infectious diseases. How?
The bill said if someone is suspected to have an infection, if someone is suspected to have an infectious disease, mind you, when we are talking about infectious disease, we are not just talking about COVID-19. We're also talking about common cold. We are talking about typhoid fever. We are talking about cholera. We are talking about hepatitis A. Any disease that can move from one person to another. So what that is saying is, if I have common cold, for instance, the NCDC or the health officer or even the police can be, based on suspicion, drag me from a vehicle, a public vehicle, or from my office, or from anywhere to the hospital without whether I like it or not. If we categorize it, there are different levels of infectious disease. It's not every infectious disease that is COVID-19 or Ebola. So we can have certain exceptions. If we have COVID-19 and someone is suspected to have it and the person is running into the general population, yes, you can use extraordinary measures to get the person because you want to protect the overall population. But that same does not apply to typhoid fever or to a common cold. So when you make this bill that is to cover all infectious diseases and you have this kind of provisions that is not contextual to the type of infectious disease that is going to be used. If I'm DG NCDC and I look at you, Mr. Edmund, as a journalist, and perhaps you've been critical about some policies of NCDC, and I'm the head of the NCDC, the bill is saying I can look at you and say, Mr. Edmund Obilo is suspected to have an infectious disease. Law enforcement agents bring him. And it also gives powers to the law enforcement, the NCDC, to quarantine you based on suspicion anywhere he feels like and for any duration. So there's a lot of any. So this could be misapplied for other purposes that could infringe on people's rights.
Dr. Laz, don't forget,
yes,
it's just a bill. It's not an act.
Yes, it's just a bill, but it could become an act if because it's passed first and second reading in one day and was even about being passed for the third reading without public hearing, without participation of the people. Before, some dissenting voices arose and they stood it down for another legislative day. So it's a bill, and that's why we're expressing these concerns. And that's why part of my suggestions was that this should be trashed, and a bill that is, that recognizes the federal structure, because this bill, pretends as if we run a unitary system. So there was no role for states, the State Ministry of Health. There was no role for local government. Everything, every power, every communication is just to NCDC.
And it works against the federal structure of the Nigerian state, right?
Yes, the bill didn't recognize the federal structure because it gave all powers to infectious disease control, to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control directly, and certain powers to Mr. President, who is to declare a public health emergency, and the Minister of Health. The other powers are to the police, excessive powers to the police. By the bill, the police can just look at you and say, I suspect you have infectious disease, so you must go and stay in so place. So it provided no rules or even to acknowledge the existence of state structures on the surveillance. The provisions on surveillance in this bill was treating surveillance by definition of, when you're doing surveillance for someone that is spying or someone that is about to do a criminal act. But surveillance, the way we use it in public health, is you're doing surveillance for a disease. You are watching out for a disease, for occurrence of a disease, so that you can report it, and the data can be used to make decisions to stop that disease. But the manner in which this bill talked about surveillance is as if you are doing surveillance on the carrier of the disease, as if the carrier is a criminal. That if you leave the criminal, the person might escape and cause other problem in the society. So it will kind of even build stigma. So right now, our surveillance process is we have a disease surveillance notification officers in every local government, and that's the place that is nearest to the people. So they do surveillance and report any disease of public health importance at that level to the states. Because when they keep their record at the LGA needs that data to make decisions. When it gets to the state will also aggregate all the data and also use to make decisions at the state level, and also transfer the same data to the federal, where NCDC and the Department of Planning, Research and Statistics also get this data. So at every level, they make use of this data. But this bill is asking that we notify every disease directly to the DG of NCDC. And what that suggests is that, the local government and the states may not even have data to work with, and they may not have any role to play, since, this bill does not, it pretends as if they don't exist. So it's going to cause more confusion based on what we currently have.
The program is State Affairs. I am discussing with Dr. Laz Ude Eze. He's a health policy and sustainable development consultant.
Reading is feeding the mind. When he feeds his mind, his body is happy and he is rich. Feed the mind. Go to www.udarabooks.com. Udara Books, feeding the mind. Boost Radio. Oh wow.
Welcome back. Dr. Laz Ude Eze is on State Affairs. He's a health policy and sustainable development consultant. Can the present situation, when isolation centers have become compulsory for COVID-19 patients, be classified as criminalization of infectious diseases?
No, it cannot be classified as criminalization of infectious diseases. And it's entirely different from what the bill, the Infectious Disease Control Bill, is providing. Right now, when someone is test positive to COVID-19, the person is expected to, stay in a place where he's not going to interact with the public and spread the disease further. Mind you, even for someone who has tested negative, can still be reinfected. And there are some people, when they get reinfected, they might not be lucky the second time. We've had reports of persons who were positive, were not symptomatic, they later became negative and got reinfected and now died the second time. So it's to protect both the persons who have the infection and also the general public. And some, at the point of testing positive, might not have any symptom, but in the course of staying, they might begin to develop symptoms. So it's for public health interest. But that's applicable to COVID-19. It's not the same thing that we do for typhoid fever. It's not the same thing that we do for hepatitis B. Right. So, but the bill is not only for COVID-19, it's for all infectious diseases that we know about. So if we have this provision that did not disaggregate to say, okay, this is the situation where you must isolate someone, this is the situation where you have to quarantine someone, and it's just generalistic, then it gives room for much violations, because if you just have common cold and sneeze, someone who doesn't like you might just take you and go and lock you up somewhere and say is isolating you.
If you looked at Femi Gbajabiamila's speech on Tuesday, he said the bill, which is still a proposal, subject to consideration, amendment, and improvement, has been assailed as a sinister attempt to turn Nigerians into guinea pigs for medical research while taking away their fundamental human rights. Do you sympathize with the speaker?
No, I don't, because there are some components of the bill that made me concerned, that even though it might not be the intention of the speaker, I seriously believe it will not be his intention, but the provision can actually empower those with such infection to do that. This bill is saying that the DG NCDC, if he suspects that you have an infectious disease, can command that you be taken isolated somewhere, and any sample, sample can be taken from the person for tests. So if you said any sample can be taken, what if they decide that they want to take your kidney for test? those who have other intentions might decide, that they want to take someone's kidney for test and use it for something else. So it kind of gave very blanket powers, that it might not be the intention of those who are sponsoring the bill, but they might have COVID-19 in mind, in putting up this bill. But about 45 infectious diseases were listed. And each of these infectious diseases are not as severe as COVID-19, and their control measures are not as drastic as COVID-19. After all, these diseases have always been here. They've always been with us before COVID-19. We didn't have to shut down the airport or lock down the country because of any of the other infectious diseases. So I feel the infectious disease is a good intention, is well intended, and there should be a robust participation of stakeholders. And many of the stakeholders that are most important in contributing to this are very busy at this time. The National Assembly does not have many health experts as members. Yes, there are some of our colleagues who are there, but when you talk infectious disease, so many persons are affected, not just doctors, even medical lab scientists, physiotherapists, public health, microbiologists, virologists, even veterinary medicine people are also involved because they're also considering zoonotic transmission of diseases from animal to human beings. So there is a whole mix of persons who are involved, and these persons should make, be in the best frame of mind to contribute to the process of enactment, and also, involve the ordinary Nigerian people. All these concerns, rightly or wrongly, are to be allayed. A lot of people have been fed with lots of information based on which they are responding. I don't agree to the conspiracy theories and some of the emotional responses that are coming, but these are concerns, and the people could have concerns for whatever reason, and we must address those concerns to get their buy-in so that they will trust the intentions and the effort that the National Assembly is making, and they will also be willing to adhere to whatever provisions that the bill is going to make when it eventually becomes law.
Did you say the most deadly Lassa Fever outbreak in the history of Nigeria?
Yes.
Please, brief us.
Yes, the most deadly and the longest, outbreak Lassa Fever occurred, from end of last year to even this year. Even as we speak, it's been largely controlled, but it hasn't completely disappeared. So, as at the end of March 2020, as at the end of the March or even mid-April, we had close to 200 persons, Nigerians, that died of Lassa Fever between the 1st of January this year to April this year. Close to 200 persons that Lassa Fever had killed, including health workers. At least 6 medical doctors were among those that the 6th person died on 1st of April this year. Plus other health workers who are affected in one way or the other. So for us, it was a kind of twin epidemic, if I must put it that way, because on one hand we have Lassa Fever, but maybe it's not getting as much headlines like COVID, because Lassa Fever, affects mostly poor people, and as well as health workers who contact it from them. So we are not having big names that are making newspaper headlines when they die, unlike COVID-19 that, people who are flying planes and traveling to big meetings and other were those who were first affected, so it took all the headlines. But Lassa Fever is still a major problem in this country that we must take every measure to prevent. In fact, Lassa Fever was first identified in 1969 in Lassa village in Borno State, in Nigeria. So it's an endemic disease in Nigeria, and every year it keeps killing people. So we need to double efforts to create more awareness, to do all preventive measures, and even perhaps sponsor local research to find vaccines or cure for it, because they are not talking about it on CNN because it's not affecting American people or European people, but these are a major problem that started in Nigeria and affects many West African countries and killing people every year in this country. It's a very serious infectious disease that we must give, the similar political will and effort we are giving to COVID-19.
Dr. Laz Ude Eze, thank you for featuring on State Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Obilo.
Bush Radio, the Deep Insight Radio.